All right, so the foldable that you guys have gotten off of Google Classroom or you got in here when you were absent, this is actually going to be the inside. So you are folding it to where you see slope, intercept, form, y equals mx plus b. And then you have cut on these nice little dotted lines right here. So these are your dotted lines that you did need to cut on. And of course, this has already been cut off for you. All right, so sometimes instead of writing it as y equals, we sometimes also write it as f of x, g of x, or basically any letter of x. This is always your output. This is also sometimes called the dependent variable. If it will help you to remember, you can think of y as having one shoe. So it can only stand on one foot. You can't stand on one foot without having to be dependent on something, otherwise you will probably fall over. This is also sometimes called the responding variable. So if you think about in science, how if you give a plant sunlight, how much it'll grow. Giving it sunlight is what you're manipulating, and then how much it grows is the response to the sunlight. This is also your vertical portion. Remember, that's your up and down. So this is always your y, which is always your up and down portion. And it's always going to be your ones on the right and on the bottom. Now, m is your coefficient of your x. That means it's the number right in front of your x. This is your number that is always there. Now, obviously, if there is no number, then you just count how many m's you have, which in this case is just 1. As I've said in class, this also describes the movement, how much it goes up and down. And it's also a lot of times referred to as the rate of change. This is your rise over run, or your change in y over change in x. If m is a whole number, the run is always 1. So, and that's with any whole number. If you want to write it as a fraction, it's always over 1. It also shows if a line is increasing or decreasing. And it determines how steep a line is. Remember, this one's positive, this one's negative, this one is 0. I've seen a lot of students have issues with this recently. That one's 0, and the one on your right is your undefined. And remember to email me if you have any questions on any of this stuff. Your x variable is sometimes called your input. It is always your independent, if it'll help you to think about it. X, basically, you could draw it as having 2 shoes. So it stands on its own 2 feet. It has also sometimes been called the manipulating variable. And it represents the horizontal portion of the graph. So obviously this is your x. You have your x here. You have your x here, and it's usually your 1 on the top. Now, your b. This is always called your y-intercept. It represents the beginning of the graph. It's also where the line crosses the y-axis. A 0b crosses at the origin. A negative b crosses below the x-axis, and a positive b crosses above the x-axis. This is always when the value of x is 0. So this top one, I'll go ahead and change color on this one. This one's your positive because it's above your x-axis, because remember, this is positive, this is negative, positive, negative. So this is positive. This one's negative because, yet again, we're below the x-axis, which is on the negative side. This one right here and this one right here are what we call a 0b. Some people think of it as no b, but this is actually technically a 0b. So remember, anytime x is 0, that's your y-intercept. So this is b is equal to 2. Moving on. Page 109. If I was to just look at this information, so here's what we know. Xander's biked 2 miles so far this week and plans to bike an average of 6 miles each day over the next several days. I'm also going to highlight so far. Xander wrote the equation, which is what we see right here, and created the graph to represent x, the number of days, which is here, and y, the total number of miles, which is here. We are finding the slope of the graph. So it's asking us, where do we see the value in Xander's equation? So obviously in Xander's equation, we see it as the number 6, because that's the number directly in front of x, or number in front of x. And we could also think of it in return as regards to this, because we've also got the variable, and this is going to tell us that this is each. I could have also seen per or every as well. Now, we're also looking at what value does attach on the y-axis. So that's obviously 2. This is also our constant in our equation. That's that plus 2. And if I'm thinking of it in terms of words, this is my so far, because this is something I'm already starting with. Anytime I'm looking for B, I'm looking for at the beginning, so far, I started with something in terms of that. Now, when I'm going through this, I obviously have y equals mx plus b. Mx being your slope, and b being your y-intercept. This is always a linear relationship. I'm not going to have any kind of curves, any kind of squiggles, anything like that. It's going to be a straight line always. The y-intercept of a graph is the value of y where the line crosses the y-axis or when x equals 0. So if I'm looking at all of these, I'm first going to look for my y-intercept here, which will always be here. So that's my b. My slope is always going to be my number in front of x. So here, y is equal to 4.5x plus my negative 10, or I could have just written this as y equals 4.5x minus 10. Either one works. One here. My slope, y equals negative 5x. It tells me I pass through the origin, so plus 0. Or I could just written as y equals negative 5x. Either one works. I can actually plug these into my calculator. So I know my slope here is 1. My y-intercept is negative 5. And if I was to plug that into my calculator, I'm going to look something like this. Same thing here. My slope is 3. I don't have a b, so I'm going to put in 0. And I'm going to have something that looks like this. This one, I have a negative 5. My slope is positive, so it's going to look something a little bit more like that. Now, always graph it in your calculator under y equals, and then remember the x button is directly next to your alpha button. All right, on the back side. This time all we're doing is looking for the y-intercept. So my y-intercept is 3, and then of course I'm looking for my slope. I look to see what my graph intervals are going by, so that's what it's going by, which is 1s. That means I'm good to go ahead and put my points down and just do my little triangle, count it as 1 over 3. This is a positive slope, so my rise over run is equal to 1 over 3, which means that's also what my slope is. So y is equal to 1/3 x plus 3. I can put this also in my calculator and double check to make sure I'm right. Joy's math. B yet again, positive 2. I know this one's a negative slope, so that means I'm going to go down and to the right. Yet again, I'm counting by ones on both. So I have 2 over 3. So I have negative 2 over 3x plus 2. The last one I'm for sure going to go through with you is this one. M is equal to 0 because it's a positive slope, and B is equal to 14. Because I have no slope, I'm not going to necessarily write a 0x, so I could just write y equals 14. Now, I want you to try 7, 8, and 10 real quick by yourself with the video. That means pause the video and try it. Did you pause the video? Are you sure you paused the video? Okay, so by now, hopefully you have paused the video. So let's talk about number 7. My B is 18. My next good point would be 421. My graph is going by 3s. That means this time, all right, so this one, my graph's going by 3s. So my rise over run, my rise this time is 3. My run is going by 1s. So I can count that 1, 2, 3, 4. That means I have 4 boxes here. So that means it's 3 over 4x plus 18. Now I'm going to move over here to 8. My B is 180. I know I have a negative slope. So my next point that I really see is 2, 120. It's counting by 20, so 20, 40, 60. So my rise is 60. My run is 2. So this becomes 60 divided by 2 is 30, or 60 over 2 simplifies down to 30. So negative 30x plus 180. And then, of course, my last one, my slope, my B is negative 18. I have a positive slope. So yet again, I'm looking for rise over run. And it looks like my next point is right here. My interval is going by 2. So my rise is 2. My runs is also going by 2. So 2, 4. So because of that, I'm going to have 1 over 2, because when I put it in my calculator under alpha y equals on 1, it gives me a positive slope. So 1/2 x minus 18. And of course our last one, our last two. So Matt's going to cross or create a graph of the equation y equals 4, 5x minus 7. So the y-axis, obviously I know right there, this would be going to the left and then stopping. So this would actually technically be over here. It would not be where I want it to be, which would be something over here. So I know this one right here is false. Now, it will increase from left to right. That means it goes left to right, and it's increasing. So that means it is positive. So that part is true. Okay, so this one, I'm looking for a negative b. So automatically, I already know that Liam cannot be it. Then I'm looking for a positive slope. I know right there she's got a positive, he's got a negative, so obviously he cannot be it. So Carissa becomes your answer. Remember, if you have any questions, email me.